2012. Skylanders Giants became the highest selling video game in the USA ever. Millions of toys sold. The kids loved it. A brilliant idea that led to insane growth in just a few years. Skylanders was at its peak, and nothing could ever ruin this. But let's go back to where it all started. Activision Blizzard, the studio we all love for their great games and overall clean track record, wanted to make a new game targeted at a younger audience, because the idiots don't know how to spend their because they had a great idea that would make many children happy. Activision took two things kids love: toys and video games. Add a bit of corporate greed, and you got Skylanders, Spyro's Adventures. To play with them, you took a Skylander, put him on the portal of power, and you had it in-game. Unlike the later games, Spyro's Adventures was great, the trippy story aside. Unique mechanics made it fun to play. There really was nothing to complain about, except maybe for the character Flynn, who I hate to the death. Don't know, just the way he looks, the way he talks. I can't stand him. But overall, this was just a good game that was made great by overpriced plastic figures. Because as a kid, nothing was cooler than Skylanders. Just the concept is genius. This is a cool looking fish with a harpoon. I probably would have wanted to have him even if I couldn't also play him in a video game. For example, I religiously collected dinosaur figures, and none of them were playable in a game. But when you bought a new Skylander, you didn't just buy a brand new toy you would eventually forget and never play with again. Which was already cool. No. To add to that, it also felt like it was alive. You could not only play around with it, but also see how it moved, talked,
it's showtime,
killed. And that's also why Skylanders television or YouTube ads were so damn effective. I sat there drooling, thirsty to spend any money I had on Skylanders whenever I saw one of them. In comparison, when you see a Lego ad, you know whatever you're eventually gonna do with the product just won't be as epic. But here I knew I could actually do all the crazy stuff they were showing me. It was real. And just a few dollars away.
And what is that, bro?
Activision based their first Skylanders game on the franchise of Spyro the Dragon. Yes, he had his own games. I actually didn't know this. But they also made other legendary characters like Fish with Gun and Monkey with 2 guns. 32 in total. And each one cost you like 10 bucks. Which actually wasn't that overpriced for a toy back then. Some people might say they weren't all too big, but in my opinion, they were pretty average for kids' toys. And they definitely had a great personality. Skylanders were divided into 8 different elements, like fire, air, and water. There were locations only a Skylander of, let's say, element water could enter.
I am under the water.
And if you didn't have a water Skylander, you couldn't. So, to play 100% of the game, you needed to pay $80 extra. But who cares about 100%? You just bought the cool looking ones, played with them, and were done with it. A good idea realized as a good game. Cool, said Activision. But was it profitable? It was. So of course, they wanted to do it again. When? Now. Just 1 year after the first game, they dropped Skylanders Giants. What changed? Well, they took the Skylanders and... like so. But don't worry, that's not all. They also put LEDs in the toys, so now they lit up when you put them on the portal of power. Arguably, the game was even better than the first one. Even more mechanics, cool gameplay, interesting story, and a rapping robot.
This robot is on the scene.
This game was the peak of Skylanders and the genre toys to life in general. Activision made hundreds of millions of dollars, and kids loved the games. The bigger figures were more expensive, but again, you didn't have to buy all of them to enjoy the game. Still, there was already a first hint of what's to come. The only suspicious aspect of the game was that some characters were released in different colors. Same toy, but different versions. This didn't hurt anybody, but you could see they kinda wanted to sell more figures. And another game, of course, which they already released the next year. In Skylanders Swap Force, you could rip apart Skylanders and then reassemble the pieces. The results were interesting. But considering they had only a few months to come up with this insane concept, it was pretty cool. Only thing, somehow it didn't work with the old Skylanders. The ripping apart worked fine, you just needed a little more force. But I could never put them together anymore. Don't know why though. As cool as the idea here was, the game just wasn't. Making a new game is a lot of work, and 1 year for that usually isn't enough. Even Activision themselves must have realized this, because for this game, for the first time, they collaborated with another studio, Vicarious Visions. And even though they got help, Swap Force was just lacking. And the exact same thing happened with Skylanders Trap Team, which came, what a surprise, 1 year later. At best, it was meh. The franchise had become quite repetitive. The most notable thing was that although they worked with Vicarious Visions again, Trap Team had even more problems than Swap Force. The game was buggy as f and just not ready. 1 year isn't enough time to make and polish an entire game. Especially when a huge part of your efforts are directed towards making 149 new toys. Bro, I was 14. The whole neighborhood didn't have that much lawn to mow to afford all of them. With this game, you really saw how they prioritized making toys over making a good game. And you can't blame them. A company needs to make money somehow. And selling a single toy, which didn't take that much effort to produce, brought them $10, while selling a copy of the game only made them $40. You could clearly see they didn't care about making a good game anymore. They just made as many toys as possible they could sell. In Trap Team, you could play as the bad guys as well, which is cool and all, but not if I have to pay $5 for a boring piece of plastic to do it. Just look at it. This isn't even a toy. This looks like it was part of a plastic bottle. At this point, every single creative idea in Skylanders was behind a paywall. Trap Team wasn't nearly as successful as its predecessors. And Activision actually realized its mistakes. It couldn't go on like this. 1 game a year was just not working anymore. So, they published Skylanders Superchargers after less than 1 year. And this time, they had no involvement in it whatsoever. Vicarious Visions actually made the entire game. In Superchargers, you could buy vehicles for your Skylanders, but of course they didn't make vehicles every Skylander figure could use. How stupid would that have been? You'd only have to buy the car too. I mean, it wasn't practical. So, also new figures for the new vehicles. Again, the game was less popular than the last one, yada yada, you know the drill. At this point, you could really see how they were scrambling for anything to make their game at least somewhat interesting. Like putting in Bowser. What is even happening? I thought this was Skylanders. Now, here's a fun little quiz for you. How long was the time span between Skylanders Superchargers and Skylanders Imaginators? The game they published next. Feel free to pause and write your guess in the comments. Did you say it was 1 year? Wrong. Actually, it was 12 months. Imaginators had better graphics, but that's it. No one even cared about it. The idea had worn out and it was plain boring by now. In the beginning, Skylanders had been fascinating. Put your toy in the portal of power, see it come to life. And now, 5 years later, you could still put your toy in the portal and see it come to life. Which would still be cool if they hadn't put less and less effort into the games. Greed entirely ruined this franchise. Instead of focusing on perfecting the games and making the best out of every concept, Activision prioritized making money. They had made as many games and toys as they could in the least possible time. Obviously, that obliterated all quality, and the games became mid. Rushing game after game just made them continually worse. Over time, Activision clearly changed their focus from making a game with toys on making toys with a game. Simply because that way, They earned more.